you have ADHD, you know that your brain works differently. And if you've struggled with pornography, you know that porn has affected your brain negatively. So what happens when one brain has two competing forces that are working against it, and what can you do to walk in freedom? We're gonna break all of that down in today's episode. Welcome to the Man Within podcast. My name is Sathiya. I'm a men's transformation coach, international speaker, and author. I've been running this podcast for several years now, helping thousands of guys from around the world quit pornography. I'm super glad that you have tuned in today. Now, before I jump into the content today, I want to let you know that my bread and butter is helping men quit pornography. If you're looking for some help with this, I wrote a book called The Last Relapse a few years ago that details my system that has helped over 1,000 guys quit porn. This book has now been read by tens of thousands of people. It comes with a free workbook. There's a free community of people that are reading this book online as well if you want to join that. You can get all of it for free, including the book itself, at thelastrelapsebook.com. And if you're more of a physical copy guy, I totally get it. I am personally myself, either that or audiobooks. Physical copies can be bought anywhere that books are available, and we donate all those profits to charity in Uganda to further the gospel in Muslim villages through evangelistic soccer tournaments. It's one of the coolest charities that I know of, so I'm really honored and proud that we get to sponsor it. Let's jump into today's material. So we're talking about the ADHD brain, and obviously in this context of our show, we talk a lot about pornography, and how these two kind of how different subjects interplay with pornography. Now, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you've heard us talk about the effects of pornography on the brain. There are many different ways that viewing pornography programs your brain. And I would say the earlier you get exposed, the more programming takes place. So for me, I was exposed at 11 years old. Most people today are getting exposed anywhere from the age of 8 to 10 typically. Sometimes it's a bit later. These are very young, formative stages of life to have such a intense stimulus affect your brain and your body. And the thing is that, when we get exposed as kids or as teenagers, we're not just watching it every once in a while. Generally, we're watching it pretty often. And so the programming is intense. Now, you can listen back to other pieces of content if you want all the details of that. But the other angle I wanted to introduce in today's video is the ADHD brain, the neurodivergent brain. And I'll be honest with you, that today's episode is inspired by my interview with Dr. Tamara Rozier, which just came out a couple weeks ago. She is one of the world's leading experts on ADHD. Absolutely fascinating content and material. And I think if you have ADHD, you really do need to go listen to that interview in full depth. What I wanted to talk about today, though, is basically this interesting dynamic that exists between ADHD and porn users. So when you have ADHD, what happens is there's a part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, as the neuroscientists say. The PFC is the part of your brain that kind of keeps everything in order. It reminds you that you left the stove on. It makes sure that you double check that you lock the door before you walk out of the house. It's the thing that, reminds you, hey, winter's coming, and where I live in Canada, you got to put your winter tires on. Your prefrontal cortex is the thing that reminds you, hey, you could watch that pornography now, but you might regret it later. The prefrontal cortex, it really is what allows us to have higher levels of thinking, and as a species, it is the part of our brain that kind of separates us from the rest. Not that other species don't have a PFC, they just don't have it nearly as developed as we do. So here's the interesting thing. The interesting thing is if you go into any of the data on ADHD, what you find is that people with ADHD do not have the same level of PFC engagement that a typical brain would. And so the ADHD brain, it already doesn't have that filter, that, are you sure? Do you really want to do this? Have you thought through the ramifications? Now, pornography is so enticing that even somebody with a neurotypical brain still will bypass that filter, or sometimes doesn't even really pay attention to that filter. So it's not to say that, because you have ADHD, you miss out on this filter that would otherwise save you from pornography. It's not quite like that. It's just to say it's another layer, it's another factor to consider. Because you don't have that PFC, that sort of prefrontal cortex filter or blocker, what happens is the ADHD brain starts looking for other ways to basically deal with fight or flight. So the ADHD brain ends up in fight or flight very often. I would say more typically than your neurotypical brain. And that is because you don't have the PFC as active, right? So you could get threatened, or your brain could kind of trigger a threat. Maybe it's not a legitimate threat. Maybe I don't even know. Maybe out of the corner of your eye you see someone running, and initially you're like, oh man, what's going on? Because they kind of came close to you and it sort of freaked you out. Well, your prefrontal cortex makes you realize, oh, they're just walking fast and they were passing me. They're not trying to mug me or something like that. So I'm not saying, again, people with ADHD will have those experiences as well. But the point is that when you have a fight or flight response, without the prefrontal cortex as active as it could be, it seeks other ways to medicate, other ways to soothe, and other ways to numb. And this is where pornography becomes very appetizing. Now, if you have listened to the show, we have talked extensively about hypofrontality. You will even know what that big word means, because that is one of the major effects of pornography on the brain. Hypofrontality, which means reduced circulation to, you guessed it, the prefrontal cortex, the same part of your brain that is affected by ADHD. So between having ADHD and then watching a lot of pornography, you have now made extra sure that your prefrontal cortex is not going to operate normally. And what this does is it makes you vulnerable to things that are very stimulating in a way that is more stimulating or more addictive, I would say, than the typical brain. And so the ADHD craves pornography because pornography gives it a sense of excitement, sense of relief, sense of whatever it might be. But at a deeper level, the ADHD brain doesn't have the prefrontal cortex to rein things in and to kind of keep it back on the straight and narrow. And so you end up with really strong addictions to pornography when you have the ADHD brain. Now, I promised in this episode that we were going to talk about what you can do about this. And here's a really, really cool hack that I got from Dr. Tamara Rozier, who's on the podcast. This was actually her second time. And she talked about this a lot more in the first episode, which is, I think, 3 or 4 years ago now. So you can go back into the archives if you want to find that as well. But here's what she said. She said, for people with ADHD that view pornography, there's one very important question that you can ask yourself. Is pornography a stimulant or a relaxant? Is pornography a stimulant or a relaxant? Now, why is this so important? Because when we understand the role that pornography plays in our life, we can find a superior solution. So let's say that for me, I kind of get this flat line and I watch pornography to get a little bit of a kick. It's a stimulant in my life. Well, if I know that, then the next time I want to watch pornography, I need to ask myself, what is a superior way that I can experience some stimulation? Maybe I go for a walk. Maybe I phone a friend. Maybe I read a really interesting book. These are things that anybody can do, but you have to first understand the role that porn plays in your brain. And conversely, if pornography is a relaxant, you're a little bit kind of wired but tired, you're a little bit angsty, and you can kind of feel that edginess in your body, and you watch pornography to actually, gives you something to focus on because it's so stimulating, and in the ADHD brain, it's very hard to sort of rein in your attention. So pornography gives you a chance to just, I'm focused, I'm dialed in, and I'm relaxed. Well, the next time you want to watch pornography, you have to ask yourself, what is a superior way for me to relax, for me to experience relaxation? And again, some of those things might actually be the same answers. It might be going for a walk, doing some meditation, phoning a friend. Right? There's nothing right or wrong here. And it's not even to say that what causes stimulation versus what causes you to relax are very different things. Sometimes they're not, but maybe you have one friend you talk to and he can just calm you down. He puts you in a chill state. Maybe you have a different friend you talk to and he gets you all wired up and excited. You just have to know what you need and then act accordingly. And I'm telling you right now, in my community, I would guess probably about 30 to 40% of our client base, we work with hundreds of guys at any given day. They all have ADHD, that 30 to 40% contingent have ADHD to some degree. And some of these strategies, this strategy here that I just laid out for you, they find really helpful. So this is not just a nice, pie in the sky kind of idea. This actually works. This is incredibly practical. And truthfully, if you don't have ADHD and you're just looking for ways to improve your brain health and quit pornography, you can kind of do the same thing because that same filter is applicable to a neurotypical brain as well. So look, if you have ADHD and you're struggling with pornography, this is your chance, okay? Go try this. Practice it for a week. Just every single time you feel like watching pornography, ask yourself, what do I need? Is it a stimulant? Is it a relaxant? What's a superior solution? And after a week, you will have a pretty good idea of, number one, the role it's serving, because it's likely not both a stimulant and a relaxant. It's probably one or the other. And number two, you should have a gauge on some activities that you find really helpful. Now you can build a preemptive plan so that the next time you do feel triggered, boom, you're good to go and you don't go down that path viewing pornography. Look, if you are struggling with porn and you want to quit for good, get your copy of The Last Relapse, my system that has helped tens of thousands of men quit pornography. You can get a free copy at thelastrelapsebook.com. I hope to see you over there. God bless you guys. We'll see you in the next one.